I think we're live now. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Weaver, and this is
I'm Christy, Goodbrand.
my good friend and fellow type 1 diabetic. We actually connected about a year ago online in the type 1 community on Instagram. So, this is such a super unique opportunity for us. We're so excited to be connecting with all of you today to share our experience with type 1 diabetes and pregnancy. So, as you can imagine, there's a lot to encompass there in that topic. However, for today's purpose, we're going to walk through a little bit about planning, what that looked like for us, tips and tricks along the way, and then, of course, first, second, and third trimester of pregnancy. And lastly, we will touch on labor and delivery and postpartum. So, let's see here. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes last year. Feels a lot longer than that in my mid 20s. And it was in May, actually, just a couple of months before my wedding. So I live currently in the Charlestown, West Virginia area. And I'll toss it over to Christy to introduce herself.
Sure. So I'm Christy. I was diagnosed with diabetes in my 30s about 2 years ago. So I think Stephanie and I kind of bonded over that too. And let's see. Yeah, I live in Orange County, and yep.
Awesome. Great. So let's go ahead here and kick it off with planning. So if you don't mind, Christy, you want to share like what planning looked like for you with type 1?
Yeah, sure. I am pretty crazy, I guess, when it comes to my management. Really hard on myself, which probably isn't like the best thing, but I think because I do manage, I did pre-bolus, I kind of had a good A1C going into it. So it wasn't something like, oh my gosh, I have to lower my A1C, I have to do this and that. So I felt really comfortable or like confident getting pregnant. And luckily for my husband and I, we were super fortunate. First time we got pregnant, we're like, all right, well, I guess we're ready. Let's go for it. And I tried to listen to a lot of juice box podcasts on like pregnancy to kind of prepare myself mentally, kind of like know what's coming ahead. And then the type 1 pregnancy book that was super helpful too, kind of breaking down what to expect, what's going to happen with resistance. So that's kind of how I prepared.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. So I know that we connected right around the time that we both, disclosed that we were expecting, which, as you can imagine, was right around the same time as our boys were born just 2 weeks apart. Mm-hmm. However, I would say for planning, that looked a little different for me. So I actually was diagnosed with type 1 after a pre-existing autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's. Oftentimes those coincide. So actually we were checking out my numbers for my thyroid, and that's when I was diagnosed with type 1. So a lot of my planning and preparation was around my Hashimoto's as well as type 1. A lot of that looked like, lowering my A1C down into at least the sixes. But a lot like Christy, I'm pretty hard on myself and really wanted to get in the fives and stay there as much as possible throughout my pregnancy, just for the health of my son. I know that's not always the case, but to each their own. So that's what planning looked like for me, from the perspective of my endocrinologist. Additionally, though, I did definitely spend a lot of time researching. I mean, Google University was probably my heaviest source for planning. And I will say too, I watched a lot of webinars, especially some that were actually offered by the American Diabetes Association. So my planning, there was a few months that went into it, but I would say the third month that we were trying, we conceived. So just checking all the boxes and making sure, that your endocrinologist is on board with, your efforts around planning, and really trying to strategically lay out what that will look like for you and your individualized health plan. So let's jump ahead here to the first trimester. Christy, if you don't mind, you want to share with me a little bit about, what that looked like for you and balance?
Sure. Yeah. So first trimester, I'm trying to think back to when I noticed a dip. Like I needed a decline in my insulin. And I don't know, it might've been right around the time I took a pregnancy test, or even like a week before. And I started to notice I needed less and less insulin, or I was having so many lows. And I'm like, this is so strange, so bizarre. So first trimester, definitely so many lows, needing way less insulin. I was on a pump, so I could manipulate that really easily. I didn't have to wait the next day to take less basal insulin or whatnot. So that was really nice. Navigating the pre-bolusing with the nausea was really rough. For me, I was nauseous in the morning, and the minute I would roll over in bed, open my eyes, I was nauseous. And so I would have crackers, and I was always like, I need a bolus for these crackers, but I can't. And so I just ate the crackers, maybe took insulin after, or just ate a couple to like get something in my stomach because I was so nauseous. And then I couldn't wait for my pre-bolus for breakfast. So I think those were like the two big things I noticed, really needing less insulin and just kind of trying to navigate pre-bolusing for breakfast with the nausea.
I would have to agree. Morning sickness was pretty bad for me in the first trimester as well. And it was really difficult, when it came to managing your sugars because, if there was nothing in my stomach, then I'm going low, right? But then I have to bolus for the crackers that I don't know if I'm going to, want to finish because of the nausea. It was just, it's a little bit of a game, but you figure it out. And, I feel like once I hit that like 14 weeks, the nausea went away, luckily for me in my case. And so, blood sugar management got a lot easier. However, I agree too. I felt like I noticed a drop in my needs, probably right around like 8 weeks or so, maybe a little bit after that. But yeah, I definitely noticed a drop in my insulin needs there at the end of the first trimester. Now, the second trimester, I feel like that's when I started feeling a little bit, more of the insulin resistance for sure. I'm sure you did too.
Oh yeah, second trimester was rough, and I don't think I expected it in the second trimester because everything from what I read generally was like third trimester is the resistance. So second trimester, I was having the worst spikes. I mean, with anything I would eat, like I would drink water and my blood sugar would spike. It was crazy. And so I kept thinking I need more basal, more basal, more basal. And I would do that, but I really needed to change my insulin to carb ratio. And I had probably like 30 to 40-minute pre-bolus. I mean, it was crazy. And I couldn't pre-bolus for 30 to 40 minutes most of the time. So what I did is I ate and I would crank my basal. I did like 100% basal increase and just threw insulin at it and would go for walks. And it was a massive, a big roller coaster. So that was definitely the hardest trimester for me for sure.
I agree. It was a learning curve. I honestly want to say the third trimester for me personally was the hardest, but the second, I mean, there was definitely some waves to it for sure. And I know we touched, on this a lot as we were through our pregnancy, but I know we were keeping notes, right? So that when the next time comes around, we're not so blindfolded, right?
And I'm sure the next time it's going to be completely different. Like, because for me, third trimester, I like studied out and my insulin needs dropped. And each week I was asking my doctor, like, are you sure the baby's okay? Like, I'm not having placenta failure. And she's like, you're fine. You're fine. But I'm sure next baby, I'll have resistance in the third, or who knows? But at least we have those notes to kind of remind ourselves, have an idea, guidance, hopefully.
Right. No, I agree. I agree. I think also, the second time around, naturally, I'll just have,
Yeah.
more knowledge, not just around type 1, but just pregnancy in general, right? It was quite an experience, but nonetheless, so then, the third trimester as well, for me, I would say that this was definitely the most challenging, mostly because the amount of insulin that I needed to take, I would say the middle of the third trimester towards the end made me very uncomfortable taking, I mean, and I did this pregnancy with multiple daily injections. So say pre-pregnancy, right? I'm taking maybe an insulin to carb ratio of 1 unit of insulin to every 15 carbs. And then there in the third trimester, I found myself needing, 1 unit for every 7 carbs. And then I eventually bottomed out at 1 to every 4 carbs. And, I would never imagine doing that if I wasn't pregnant and carrying this watermelon, right? So I feel like that was one of the biggest hurdles for me was just to digest how much insulin my body actually like needed. It was a lot.
I know that was crazy for me too. And I think, I don't know. I mean, us being so newly diagnosed too, we were figuring everything out and my carb ratio was really similar. And I remember calling my endocrinologist. And I think I was at like 1 to 7 or something, like second trimester. And I called him. He's like, yeah, go down 1 to 5 or 1 to 4. And I was like, where else am I going to go? Am I going to go like 1 to negative? And he was kind of like laughing because that's what it feels like. You're like, how much insulin do I need for this banana when maybe I used to take a unit or two? Now it's like 7 units for this banana. And then being on a pod, I mean, it just takes forever. So for me, pre-bolusing, just to get the insulin in my system would take like 5, 7 minutes. And then on top of it, waiting another 30 minutes. It was hard. I was hungry.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I can imagine. Yeah, I feel like I agree with you there too. Sometimes it was just simply nerve wracking, right? Like how much insulin I realized I needed. But
Mhm.
then I thankfully had the advantage of my Dexcom. So I
Mhm.
was able to, look at my sugars in practically real time
Yeah.
rather than sticking my fingers, 12 times a day or what have you. But
Yeah.
I would say a CGM was the holy grail for me with my pregnancy. It was just, I think it was such an essential resource, and I highly encourage anyone who's thinking about getting pregnant, or perhaps anywhere along in their pregnancy journey as a diabetic to get a CGM because I mean, just having that data at your fingertips is truly, truly a blessing.
Definitely. And I agree with that too. Cause in second trimester, like I said, I'm not kidding. It'd be like water or something that didn't really have carbs, like vegetables, like weird things that I never personally bolused for pre-pregnancy. And my blood sugar immediately would be like double arrow up. I would immediately get into the 200s. And without a CGM, I could only imagine that I would be 300, 400 an hour, 2 hours post without knowing. And now really having to do damage control and not feeling well when you're already pregnant and kind of run down. So that was really, really a good thing to use.
Right. No, I completely agree with you. And, one thing too with the insulin resistance, right? I thankfully was, in that third trimester around springtime. So I was able to get outside and go for walks, to help bring my sugars down. However, it was rather difficult, I found, to exercise, with MDI. If, I'm doing my long lasting in the morning, right? I need to factor in exercise at the time that I'm administering the long lasting insulin. So that's the thing. Okay, well, if at 8 a.m., I'm thinking, oh, a workout sounds great at 4 p.m. And then 4 p.m. gets there and I'm like winded, from being so huge. I
Yeah,
mean, I would break a sweat changing bed sheets.
sure. Yeah, I
Like,
know totally.
right. No joke. So I just thought that was rather difficult with the multiple daily injections route. However, there has been, I would say, some stigma that, it's really not healthy to do it with MDI. It's not encouraged, but I did enjoy the freedom, of being tubeless and not needing to change a pump every few days or what have you. However, in the same breath, I do think that the pump having the advantage of, managing the basal insulin in the background was truly, truly, an advantage.
Yeah, I always remember thinking to myself too, like, I don't know how people on MDI do this. Like, I was just so hard on myself, thinking like, what would I do? Because I was constantly making changes to my basal throughout the day with MDI throughout the day, for meals and stuff. So I was thankful I had that technology too, especially with the changing in my rates. So there's just so much to think about when you're pregnant and plan, but it's totally doable. And I think I was so hard on myself. And I mean, luckily my son is healthy. His blood sugars were healthy when he was born. So part of me is like, oh, it was worth it. But I think next time I can relax a little bit because I was I was just so hard on myself with all the high blood sugars and he's fine.
Right, right. No, and I think retrospectively too, I think back and I'm like, wow, I was maybe a little extra, right, in these areas. But in that, moment, it's like
Oh,
do what's best, right? And do your ultimate best. So I can understand that for sure. Also while we're talking about the third trimester, let's touch on the doctor's appointments too, because I feel like this trimester, I mean, I was practically living there. Like I could rent.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember one doctor's appointment. My blood sugar was sitting at like 200, and I knew I was like, I need to move. And they were so behind, and I'm sitting there, and no one had come to check on me. And I was so mad. I'm like, I just need to move, and I'm hooked up to this monitor, and baby is fine. I've counted the kicks. Like, I know he's good. Like, can I just get out of here? So that was really hard. And luckily for me, I was teaching, and it got to summer, so I didn't have to kind of balance work in some of those appointments, but it was rough balancing work in those appointments and being so tired and yeah, not looking forward to those again.
I know. Oh my gosh. It just felt like a revolving door. Like I was like, I was just here. I'm here again. I'm here again.
Mhm.
Right. So
Mhm.
with my endo, I saw him, I want to say every 4 weeks throughout my pregnancy. The OB I was seeing every 4 weeks. And then towards, I want to say 32 weeks and beyond, I was every other week.
Mhm.
And then MFM was monthly until, yeah, I would say about 32 weeks. And then I saw them, every other week that I wasn't seeing OB. So I was constantly, in the eyes of a doctor at some, in some realm or another. But it was, I will say, while there's the stress of that, it was also nice though. I personally enjoyed like
Yeah.
having more check-ins, or the frequent ultrasounds, especially towards the end. I think we were a little spoiled in that regard.
For sure. That was super nice. It was so nice, like seeing baby and getting all those ultrasounds. And, friends that were not diabetic, they're like, oh, I've only had one ultrasound or two ultrasounds. And that was really nice. But for me too, I mean, I had some scares along in my pregnancy because of diabetes in a way. Like when I was first pregnant, and I might have told you this story, but when I was first pregnant, they did a scan. I think it was 12 weeks pregnant, and his bladder looked really big. And so, me, I'm like, well, what does that mean? Tell me everything. Basically scared me that there was going to have to be this surgery in the womb. And I'm freaking out. I'm sobbing. I'm so pregnant and so emotional. I go back 2 weeks later and he's completely fine. So in my mind, I'm like, if I wasn't diabetic, I wouldn't have had that scan and I wouldn't have been scared. And so it you have to tell yourself, I'm so grateful I get these scans, but sometimes it's hard when you're tired and you have to go again for, another stress test, or you get scans like that. And that was really hard. And being so monitored, my baby was really big my whole pregnancy, but my blood sugars were managed really well. So it was this balance of like, do you and your husband make big babies, or is your baby big because of your blood sugars? Are you going to be able to deliver normally, or are you going to have a C-section? And so to me, it was all this like kind of added stress. I don't know if you felt that way ever too, having to go do those, at first those stress tests. I'm like, okay, is everything okay? What's going on? And of course, throughout it gets more normalized, but it was really stressful for me at first.
No, and I mean, I will agree with you there in that regard. I feel like being, more in their eye, it was almost like maybe little things that would have just slipped by with a normal pregnancy that wasn't monitored under this microscope, was exemplified because I'm high risk, right? Because I have type 1. And I would say I think it was 27 weeks when I went for a stress test, and what we later found out was just Braxton Hicks contractions, were populating on the test results itself. And they actually sent me to labor and delivery. And I had to sit there for 4 hours. I mean, it was stressful for me. Of course, baby felt the stress, and I'm thinking, oh goodness, please not this early, right? I still need you to cook in there. And thankfully, it was really a false alarm. But I will say, with being under this like tight microscope, I maybe things that would normally just be, under the radar for people without type 1 are definitely noticed for sure.
Yeah, I recently I asked one of my friends, another girl I met through social media. I'm like, do you think next baby I'd be able to skip all these stress tests? And she was actually like, well, I've asked my doctor, and my doctor laughed at me and said no. So
Which
sometimes,
right?
yeah, I know. Sometimes it feels like, do I have to be here? But like, if anything were to ever happen, it's so nice that we do have those appointments. Because I always panicked and worried, and so as much as I kind of like hated them and was annoyed by them, I think secretly I really liked them, and it was nice to have comfort knowing baby was okay and everything was kind of progressing how it should. So
Indeed. No, I'd have to agree with you there. So, for sake of time too, let's go ahead and dive into labor and delivery and like what that looked like for each of us. So if I'm not mistaken, you were also induced, correct?
yeah, I was induced at 37 weeks, like 37 and a half. So I my induction was fine. Again, I think I like to like, oh, I was induced, but all it was so nice knowing when you're going in. And I had my blood sugars managed the whole time, which I was kind of hesitant about, but in my case, it was great. I was super vocal with my doctor saying I need to be managed the way I manage, like really just aware. I heard so many crazy stories of people whose blood sugars were mismanaged and they were in the 200s and all this stuff. And so yeah, every hour they'd come in, they'd check my blood sugar, they would adjust it. I think I got to like 114 was the highest I got, and I kind of cruised at like 85, 95 the whole time. It was great. I feel like it was the first time in a year and a half, 2 years that I didn't think about diabetes and I didn't manage it. So for me, I thought it was a great break.
Yes, I can imagine so, right? Did they let you wear your Dexcom?
They did. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they still checked manually. I think I told them I wanted to stick my finger because I remember when I was diagnosed in the hospital, that like guillotine that they stick your finger with hurt so bad. So I just didn't want to go there. I'm like, let me do it. But I kind of wish they did it because I had to wake up and prick my finger. And so now next time I think I just want to be like asleep and give them my hand and prick it for me. So
Right. No, I'm with you there. Thankfully, in my situation, I was able to wear my Dexcom as well, which was very nice. To be honest, I don't think they pricked my finger once, shockingly. But what I did like is when it came to administering the insulin, they let me inject myself. And
oh,
how I like feel comfortable, that's what I'm used to. So I personally really appreciated that, that they were willing to let me do that. So I enjoyed that. I was induced at 38 weeks and 2 days. There was backlog. I guess everyone decided, in late June, they wanted to have a baby. So I was put back a little bit. But I was in labor for, oh gosh, I think it was 27 hours. Yeah, we started my induction. And within 24 hours, I had an epidural, which I actually had a faulty epidural. I didn't really expect that to be a thing. So that's a whole other story for a different day. But all in all, my blood sugars did really well too. I was on a liquid diet for the majority of my labor. However, my sugars, I would say, stayed between, 80 and probably 140. I mean, anytime I got over 120, they were like, bring it down right now, and I'm like, if only you knew I was definitely going over 120 this entire pregnancy. But, it's all good. I definitely think, shy of the faulty epidural, I had a great induction experience.
yeah, me too. I think I don't know. I feel like maybe I would have wanted to be induced during the day. I don't know why. My labor was pretty quick because I think I was like 20 hours as well. It all worked out. I mean, next time I'm just like, whatever, let's just do it. Let's get this over with. Stress test, baby out of here, whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's all just personal preference. And I think mostly too, it depends on your doctor and depends on the hospital because I was able to wear my pump. I just turned my insulin off. I kind of didn't make like a big spectacle about it. I just did it. I don't even think they asked. But definitely make sure you've got that figured out or you're on board. I mean, all this stuff I ran by my doctor, of course. Like she knew I could wear my pump, told me to turn it off. So I was comfortable doing that.
That's good. Yeah. One thing I would recommend too is definitely making, a log while you're in there, but also a list with your endo of what your plan is, right? So right after I delivered, or let's see, the morning of my induction, he was like, I want you to do 50% basal. And, I never would have thought of that. Right. And then after I delivered, he was like, drop down to even like half of what you were taking pre-pregnancy for long lasting. And again, I wouldn't have thought of that, so I think it's important that women also meet with their endos or healthcare team who's managing their diabetes to talk about a plan around insulin once you deliver, because that was very interesting to me, and I will say I wouldn't have known otherwise, so that was definitely important to note.
Yeah, definitely. And I know for me too, and I'm everyone is different. I mean, I think I saw my endo in the first trimester, like right when I conceived, and he basically just told me, if you want me here, I'm here. You want your MFM? I always called her my high risk doctor. But if you want her to manage, it's totally up to you. And so I made the plan with her. I think I called my endo one more time when I was having that resistance, but I didn't even see him. And I mean, I love my endo, but I really relied on my high risk doctor and that team. But I know some people meet with other people or don't have such a good, I don't know, care team or meet with our endocrinologist. So as long as you're meeting with a doctor and feel comfortable in what you're doing, I think that kind of helped me know like, okay, I'm on the right track. My doctor supports me. I'm doing the right things. So
I agree. I
yeah.
agree completely. And also, staying in touch even into that postpartum, stage as well. I personally, postpartum, you hear everything, but you don't really know it until you walk it, right? And
Yeah.
especially in regards to type 1. I mean, my insulin needs plummeted. I feel like I was actually riding something which I believe is postpartum phenomenon, if I'm not mistaken, is the term for it, where no joke, for a couple of weeks, I needed pretty much like no insulin. It was insane. Did you experience that?
Gosh, I don't even remember, to be honest. I think I definitely needed insulin. I was very lax because I just did not want to go low. I remember like being in the hospital eating like a sandwich and chips, and I don't know, I think I was like 200 or 180 or whatever I was, and I was like, cool, great. I'm not gonna like fight this. I don't want to go low. I'm not even
Mhm.
gonna worry about it. But I think I needed less basil, maybe less with like food. Something was a little off, but I'm all over the place. Insulin needs are literally all over the place. So.
Right. And, another factor of that too is breastfeeding.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure, Christy, are you breastfeeding?
Not anymore. We had issues, but I think at first definitely I was low, like middle of the night. And I think I remember now. I was taking like no insulin. I'm like, I don't know what to do because I'm not taking any insulin. I have no insulin on board and my blood sugars are low. So I was just always eating.
Right. No, I agree. I was stalking, the breastfeeding sections or areas I have in my house, all my little nooks with like juice boxes and candy, jelly beans. I mean, you name it. I was putting low stacks just about everywhere because you'd get nap trapped, right? And then you're nursing and it's like, oh,
Mhm.
but I'm low, right? So, uh,
That's what it felt like. I feel like every time I sat down to nurse, I'm like, my blood sugar's low. I should have checked this before I sat down but same as you, I had a little basket, so I'd be eating or whatever, and it was always fine.
yes, indeed, indeed. No, and that's another thing too. I think, having good support for breastfeeding is also important because I definitely underestimated just how taxing it was and just exhausting on a new mom, to begin with. But then there's this whole other aspect of like, trying to keep up with the supply and then you balance the sugars and it was a lot. So I would definitely recommend, having a good resource as a lactation consultant or, another healthcare professional of some realm to have their contact easy to
Totally.
grab because it was definitely a lot harder than I was expecting, to be honest.
It was, I think, out of like pregnancy and everything. And I joke, I'm like, I'll be pregnant and diabetic again, no problem. But like breastfeeding, help. It was so hard. I also struggled with it so badly. And I just didn't prepare because I was so focused on baby and that he was safe and pre-bolusing and all these things that I was not ready for that world.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely agree. I completely agree. And so I've also, just been telling myself in this postpartum phase of life, if this even is still postpartum 4 months out, right?
Totally.
I feel like, I just keep reminding myself, give myself grace, right? Because some days I'm like, wow, I killed it. What is diabetes, right?
Yeah.
And then some days it really just like it takes me down, especially too when, you're balancing not getting a lot of sleep because of baby and then your CGM alarms are also going off. And it's just like, if it's not baby, it's diabetes.
And I think that was the hardest part too. Like after 9 months, like I just remember telling my husband, I'm like, you don't understand. It's 9 months that I've been on of like intently managing my diabetes. And like I said, I was probably really extreme, but any high blood sugar, I would go for a walk and I would beat myself up thinking like, oh my gosh, is my baby okay? Probably to like the other extreme that I was so stressed and the stress wasn't good, so exactly, you have to give yourself grace and know that everything is okay. And if your doctor is happy with what you're doing and like what you're doing is okay, like just go with it because at the end of the day your baby will be okay as long as you're managing yourself in somewhat of a decent way.
Right. Yes. No, I'd agree with you there. And, in closing, I just want to share, I know that sometimes type 1 diabetes and pregnancy can seem like, this big, scary, horrible thing, right? That no one's prepared. Are you ever really prepared? It just, a lot of women have, connected with me online and said that they've actually, not gotten pregnant simply because they're just terrified. And I just want to say it is possible, right? So if you have the right resources, the right mindset, it is totally possible, and you can do it. And we did it, and we're here sharing our story, and it's going to be hard, right? But it is totally manageable. And, once he was laid on my chest, every, late CGM alarm, every bolus, every injection, I feel like there was endless injections. It was all worth it. It was also worth it. So you can.
Totally. And I think the one thing that if I would have to say what's one thing you can do, I think pre-bolus, like I would literally set a timer. Well, luckily when I had my pod, I could see how long I bolus, but when I was on MDI, I was setting timers on my phone. But I think just pre-bolusing, I think is one thing you want to change or one thing that can help. I think that in essence, like you're golden.
Right. Indeed. Yes, for sure. Pre-bolusing is very important. And, setting a timer for those of us with MDI, right? Sometimes that 20 minutes would change. Sometimes I'd need 30 or I need 45, right? So it's just taking every day, right, with grace and understanding that as long as you do your best, that has to be the best, right? So there's so many things that we can control, but with type 1, as we all know, there's so many things we can't.
So many things. And online, like the diabetes community on Facebook, on Instagram, I mean, that really got me through too. I think I asked people on there more questions than I would my endo or my high risk doctor. So that was also really helpful.
Yes, I would have to agree with you. So, in closing, we just want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening to us share our experiences with type 1 diabetes and pregnancy. If you'd like to connect with either of us, we are happy to. You can find me on Instagram at the.diabetesdiary. And Christy?
I think mine is Christy_T1D. I don't know. If worst comes to worst, find Stephanie, find her friends, look for Christy, and I'll be there.
There you go. Yes, thank you all so much. We enjoy it.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.